G'day, welcome to Goat Fantasy. It's the Colby McKercher edition. Nice to have your company on the podcast. I'm your host, Drew Jones. Goat Fantasy brought to you by checkmyrate.au. Visit the website. It's free to use. Take control of your financial future. As home loans go up, get yourself a better rate. From Brandon at the team, mention Goat Fantasy. So we are into the final throws, the last couple of days before we have to essentially lock in our teams and be set and ready for a massive year of fantasy. I wanted to let this week breathe a little bit. There's so much content which needs to be consumed. You know, if you're really serious about your fantasy, and I assume if you're listening to this podcast, you're engaged, and you need to get your head straight and get sorted. And I think Goat Fantasy will come into its own as the season goes on and things pop up, storylines, narratives, injuries, suspensions, all that sort of stuff, role changes. We're going to be here to cover all that, but I wanted to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to really think about the final structures of their team and which players are going to be involved. And if news was going to pop up this week, I wanted to make sure that I could bring it to you. And the Colby McKercher story is one that we've followed pretty closely on Goat Fantasy over the last couple of weeks. So Colby trained fully today. I've spoken to the club and they're pretty happy that he's going to be available for selection over the weekend. They made the call to not play him in the VFL last weekend and just train with the seniors on the Saturday. And thinking probably a little bit about the George Wardlaw stuff. Let's not shoot ourselves in the foot and have Colby pick up an injury. And they're pretty happy with the work that he's got through, despite the fact that he's had the cracked finger in his hand, which required surgery, left hand. So here we are now, knowing that Colby is available to play against Port Adelaide, but the little curveball today that he was training with the mids. So what I've said through the entirety of the preseason, I can't remember all the different places I've popped up, but he has trained with the mids, and it's clearly something that they're exploring. But I still think this is an upskilling situation and that he'll play the majority of his time off the halfback flank. I guess the curveball, which has come sort of a little later in the pre-season, is that Tom Blamires was signed from Frankston, formerly working, I think, in accounting at Collingwood. He won the best young player in the VFL award, which generally results in an AFL contract, and that's been the case at North. And he was certainly really impressive as a mature age body coming in and playing in the community series. And the fact that he is playing along with Lockie Doverston is a big tick for our sides, because he's probably going to be this basement price midfield rookie that we're going to pick for round one. I've just dropped my phone. And he's going to be really good value for us. But it does just make me think, does he in any way change the dynamic of the back line? Does that affect Colby's role at all? There's only one way to find out. We're just going to have to see how it looks against Port Adelaide. And if we have to wait to see it against Port Adelaide, does that make you pause for thought on whether you actually want to pick McKercher? Is it too risky? And Colby playing a bit of time in the midfield, it's not going to extinguish his scoring, but I think we're all more comfortable with him playing off half back. And I guess the thing that's hard to reconcile for me, having watched him so closely over the last 10 to 12 months, and to be honest probably his whole career, is that he always looks best at half back. And moving him to that half forward / wing role at the start of last season was just such a terrible decision by Clarkson and the North Melbourne hierarchy, and they finally fixed it and put him to half back, and the results were there for everyone to see. He had a superb end to the season, and he's looked good in that role through the preseason. So my sincere hope is that they just don't mess with him again and they just leave him in that spot, and that Blamires comes in and takes Caleb Daniels' spot, or whether it's Hardiman or whoever, and it balances out that way. But we can't just put our head in the sand here and just pretend that him training in the midfield isn't some sort of flag. Again, I'll reiterate, we hope that it's just upskilling and that he reprises his primary role as a halfback flanker. We know Finn O'Sullivan's going to spend more time in the midfield this season and vacate his role, sort of wing halfback. And Luke Parker is going to do his thing, LDU, Tom Powell. There's still plenty of midfielders to roll through there for North. So Seems like we've all got a big decision to make in our backline with McKercher and the Kangaroos. Just as far as other fantasy news that's floating around, so Devon Robertson, that's where my head was going next. So left training early yesterday at West Coast, and there was just a bit of concern through social media that maybe he'd picked up a quad injury. So I just spoke to the club yesterday. They've assured me that Rob is all good to go. So you would think he's going to debut for the Eagles against the Suns and play probably a fairly meaty midfield role. So that's good news for our F6/F7 position. I think he's going to end up being a very decent cash cow for us with not a lot of options in that forward line. I mean, we just spoke about Daviston before. As much as he's probably got good job security at North Melbourne, small forward isn't always necessarily a recipe for high scoring. And then, of course, we've got Leo Lombard, who's an absolute lock for everyone, depending on whether you want him F6 or F7 this week against that pretty weak Eagles side. Love this time of year for all the debutants. And we got 3 out of Essendon. So Al Ashkar, small forward. Dyson Sharp, of course, was all expected through the midfield. And then Kondo Giannis, who's going to play as a defender. So we don't have Farrow yet, which presents us with a bit of a conundrum. I mean, I think we all thought that he'd be playing round 1, and certainly he's got a lot of fantasy game for us, but perhaps we don't want him to be named now because we've got so many backline options. We've got Blamires in the midfield. Perhaps, Farrow as a downgrade target a little bit later works for us a little bit better, but I just get the sense he's probably going to be pretty close to playing. He's impressed everyone at Essendon. The other debutant that was locked in today, Richmond, Sam Grill, the Thrill. This was no surprise. He's had a superb pre-season. And now you've just got to decide what line you're going to pick him in, whether he's a back or a centre. Is he a starting player in your team? He's definitely got some explosive fantasy potential, but we don't know how much Richmond want to use him and get the ball in his hands, considering they've got Jaden Short and Sam Banks as well. So no Nick Vlosten in defence. Does that open up a couple of extra possessions, a bit of market share? Maybe. But, Thursday night, it would hurt to lock in, a low score from Grill off the back. So you're going to be brave to play him from the start, but I think he's definitely got some fantasy games. So we're starting to get that template already of the rookies that are going to be in our side, and now we've all got tough decisions to make about which premiums, which underpriced guys, which mid prices, all that sort of stuff. And I just keep thinking to myself, what's the value? How much above their price are they going to perform? And trying to use that to inform a lot of my decisions. One of the hardest things that we've encountered this preseason is our ruck line. So who to go at R1? Do you go the safety of Tim English, the unknown of Luke Jackson playing midfield minutes, Brodie Grundy, the ruck pig, and then looking at these basement options, these underpriced options, and the ones that have sort of jumped off the page. Can you trust Vicentini at Port with a decent run early? Or do we go Lockie McAndrew, who, is going to be playing against Collingwood, against Darcy Cameron? That's a tough start. And if you listen to the way that Matthew Nicks spoke today, he was complimentary of Lockie Andrew, but he seemed more willing to talk fondly about the way that Riley O'Brien had adjusted to the ruck rules as the preseason has gone on. So he revealed today that essentially Riley O'Brien hadn't practiced properly jumping in the ruck for a few years because he's just not that type of ruckman, and he hasn't had to. So it's been a massive adjustment for him. So immediately Lockie McAndrew just took this lead in the ruck battle because he's taller and more athletic. And then as the preseason has gone on and Riley's had an opportunity to practice and to get back to the old rules, it seems like it's become a lot closer. So, again, we're going to have to be brave to have him at R2. There's some safety in that Vicentini at R2 and McAndrew at R3. There's a lot of different ways you can go. But, it doesn't sound like... we knew this. Rob's not going to just give up here. He's going to put up a massive fight, and so it's going to be really competitive between those two, it sounds like, which makes that decision all the harder. So a lot for us to work through. I appreciate your time on Goat Fantasy, as always. So if there's more news tomorrow, I'll pop up with another podcast, but if not, you can catch me on Friday with warning from the traders as we do our normal Friday morning teams to go through the weekend of fantasy action for you. And of course, it's a massive episode because we've got so many decisions to make about our team. But we'll take you all through the news, and we appreciate, as always, you coming back to Go Fantasy. Catch you soon.